Welcome to Learning with Learner, where we embark on a transformative journey of knowledge and personal growth. I'm Lindsay Lerner, your dedicated host and guide as we delve into the depths of unconventional wisdom. Together, we'll explore the stories and insights of remarkable trailblazers who have forged their own paths. Brace yourselves for thought-provoking conversations, profound insights, and eye-opening experiences. Our mission is to challenge the norm, ignite curiosity, and empower you to embrace your unique journey. This is Learning with Learner. I am so excited to introduce you all to Ben Stokes, a trailblazer, a venture capital visionary, and a champion of diversity and inclusion. As the founding partner of Chasing Rainbows, an early-stage investment fund, he's on a mission to amplify LGBTQ+ voices in the entrepreneurial landscape. Ben's accolades speak volumes. Recognized as a 40 under 40 rising star of venture, an LGBTQ+ pride leader, and a top 100 investor. He's not only an investor, but a mentor, guiding underrepresented founders towards global success. From the UN General Assembly to NFP boards, his influence is felt worldwide. Ben Stokes, a driving force for change, shaping a world of radical inclusivity through Chasing Rainbows.
So I was abandoned at a hospital in Sri Lanka as a baby in their hospital cafeteria and taken to an orphanage where I was for 18 months before being adopted by my parents, which is where I grew up in Tasmania. So if you've seen the film Lion, my story, my early childhood is very similar to that, except he used Google Maps to find his parents. I actually used Grindr to find mine, which is hilarious, and I can go into all of that. So 30 years after I was adopted, I went back to the orphanage for the first time after actually seeing the film Lion. A friend of mine who's in film told me I had to go and watch it. So I went completely blindly to go and watch this film, and because it was like 2 days after it came out or something. Anyway, I sat there and I watched it, and I took my 6'4" Texan mate from work, and we were sitting there like bawling our eyes out. And then we 2 days later, pretty much, I flew to Sri Lanka for the first time, and whilst there, I went on to I can't remember the name of it, but via tour, and found a tour guide who would take me around the entire island, and then I explained my situation to him, and he helped me track down the people that my parents stayed with when they got me like 30 years before. So we went to meet them. I met them on the first day I was there, which I was not prepared for. And then the rest of the time I traveled around, and then finally we got to Gaul, which is where I was in the orphanage. And we went to the orphanage, and he took me there, and he was my interpreter as well during the trip, which was great. And yeah, so we just did this, and so I got to meet, got to meet the manager of the orphanage, and then she told me that she found that there was this old book with all of the details of every child that had ever been taken there. So she went through it, and she found me in the book, and so I've got this photo of just this little line of text, which is that's me. That's all they know about me, which is. Yeah, so it says I'm roughly 2 months old. I was abandoned at a hospital, and on these are the dates and stuff, and that was kind of it. So then anyway, cut to 3 years later, where I'd been going back to the orphanage quite a lot, and I rebuilt part of the orphanage and a few other bits and pieces because the first time I was there, there was two 10-day-old babies that arrived to go into the orphanage, and so they only had, at that time, they had 3 different sections. The sections were 0 to 6 months, where they had 6 cots. Then they had 6 months to 2 years, which was like the toddler room, and then they had 2 to 5. At the age of 5, the kids then go to boarding school. And so when I was in the 0 to 6 month old room, 2 10-day-old babies arrived, and they could only take one, because they didn't have the room for the other. And I don't know what happened to the other kid. And I thought about it, it hit me really hard, because I was that kid 30 years ago. And imagine what would have happened if they didn't have the space then. And so so then I sort of like came back home and decided that I would go back and rebuild it. So we rebuilt the orphanage wing for the new babies to enable it to be 18 cots instead, and with air conditioning and a few other bits and pieces. I also did all the plumbing and stuff, and the roof and a few floors and stuff like that too.
Secret craftsman on our hands here.
Oh, no. I paid people to do that. I know. You want those babies to survive and the roof not to collapse on them. There's a difference. I know what I'm good at, and that is not.
Even better. That's an important skill to have.
Exactly. So then after that, the matron of the orphanage told me that I was actually born 5 minutes down the road. That's where the hospital was. I was like, what? And it took her like 3 years to tell me this, which is just like insane. And so I then hopped on my little scooter and drove down there. And then I just went into the hospital and then went into the medical records room and just asked them if there's any way I could have a look to see. And I told them my story. And they said, you have to go and speak to the CEO of the hospital. So I'm like, okay, cool, I'll go do that. So I walked up to the CEO's office, and he just said, look, I'm free in 45 minutes. Just wait here. So I'm like sitting there going, well, I don't know how long he's going to be. Like, really, I can't really leave. I just have to stay here. And so I jumped on Grindr because I was just bored sitting there. I wasn't trying to hook up with anyone. I was just like chatting to whatever. Anyway, this profile called Lucifer messaged me back and said, are you okay? I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. And he goes, no, are you really okay? I'm like, no, I'm fine. And he's like, no, you're in the hospital. Are you okay? I'm like, yeah, I'm okay. And I explained what I was doing. And I said I was just outside the CEO's office. And then all of a sudden this guy comes up and he says, hi, I'm one of the doctors here at the hospital. Can I help you? And he then, I explained the situation to him. And then he ended up waiting with me and then went into the CEO's room with me and then spoke to him in Sinhala and got me access to the medical record room, which we then went through together. And we went through 15,000 net possible names to put it down to 8. And then realized in Sri Lanka that they only had the ability to, they didn't have phone numbers, they only had addresses. So we would have to have rocked up to some person's house and asked them if they had left me at a hospital 30 years before. And decided that at that point that was too much for anyone to handle, particularly at the time because Sri Lanka was going through a civil war when I was born, and there was a lot of cases of rape. And so I just felt like, imagine if I looked like the guy that had raped this woman 30 years before and I rocked up to her house as this. It would break everybody's heart. So, and it just was not something I didn't need to do. I was very happy with the fact that I was able to sort of do what I needed. And yeah, so the biggest lesson that I have from that whole experience actually was the fact that single acts of kindness matter, because the very last act that my birth mother did for me was to leave me somewhere safe where I could be found, where I could then be taken to an orphanage where, the rest is history. So yeah, so then I after being adopted, I grew up on the northwest coast of Tasmania in a really tiny little town. So if you've ever done the map of Tassie, up a very, very corner, that's where I am. And yeah, so there's 3,000 people in my hometown, so it's pretty small. And I, not only was I, so we were all adopted. So obviously, from that factor, we were always different. But then on top of that, I was gay as well. So I kind of feel like I kind of spent most of my childhood trying to work out ways to get out of that small town rather than to stay there. But then I go back now. It's great to sort of see mum and dad and my grandparents and stuff. I then, just really focused on what can I do to get out of there. And so I went to university, and from there I moved to Sydney, where I lived for like 10 years. And then after Sydney, I moved to the US.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and that's kind of where I guess everything sort of started on this journey to PC.
What were you like what was baby Ben like? Did you have siblings? And how did your parents track you down and end up adopting you? What was that like?
They used an adoption agency called ASIAC, which at the time allowed people to adopt children from Asia. And so they actually applied for all three of us at the same time. So my brother, sister, and I. But I came first. My brother came 4 years after I did, and my sister came 6 years after that. So we were quite spread out. So I know this is going to sound a little bit sad, but I feel like I didn't really get to know my sister or brother as well as I probably should have, because I went away to boarding school. My sister also got she was quite sick as a baby as well, so she had leukemia. She survived, but that kind of meant that my parents, because of Tasmania being so small, they were in Melbourne, which so they went to Victoria for treatment for her. Yeah, so then young Ben is kind of like, I don't know, he's a bit of a nerd, I suppose, a bit of a loner. I was very short and small as a child. Still not that tall. Well, I'm tall enough. I'm average height now, but as a kid, I was quite short, and I didn't grow until year 9, I think, and I grew 1.5 that year. So yeah, so that's when I grew to the size I am. But what happened, I guess, when I was a kid was that like there was a lot of like Aussie sports are like quite big team sports, and particularly like there's rugby and there's AFL and stuff like that, and they were quite physical, sort of kind of like American football in a sense, and I wasn't quite built for that at the time, and so I ended up becoming a gymnast instead. So I was so I did pretty well at that.
That's incredible. I mean, I would argue gymnasts are the strongest athletes pound for pound than any other.
Yeah, I mean, like I think my favorite memory from like just proving that I was strong. I like that. Like you said, it was we went away to school camp one year, and there was a rock climbing wall and there was an overhang, and everyone, all these big beefy guys could not get the overhang, but I got up there straight away. And it was just like, how did you do that? I'm like,
I love that. I love that so much. I love that so much.
Yeah. So anyway, so then I moved to the US. I went. The reason why I went to the US was I went to Burning Man in 2015, and
all roads lead back to Burning Man.
Absolutely. And then decided after that I didn't want to go home, so I didn't. So I stayed. I stayed pretty much in the US after that.
And how did your family react to that?
Well, my parents are like, I love them. They are salt of the earth, great people. So most of the time they don't understand most of the choices I make or the things that I do. So yeah, but they love me and support me for me being, they gave me great morals and great opportunities, and they really valued education, which I think for them is something they not necessarily had themselves. So I really am thankful for that.
And where did you land in the US?
So I started in New York, so I was there for 2 years, and then I moved across to San Francisco after that.
Incredible. Now you're running your investment fund, Chasing Rainbows, which aims obviously to empower LGBTQ plus founders. Could you elaborate on, any specific success stories so far and really that impact that you're striving for?
Yeah, for sure. So I think like the biggest success story that I can talk about right now is just the fact that our fund exists and people find us using Google to find an LGBTQ plus investor if they haven't heard from us through other means. And our most successful startup to date is a startup that found us using Google. They Googled gay investor, and we came up, and we invested at a $5 million valuation cap. They are now a unicorn, and that was in a very short period of time. And I look at that and just go like, so Gold is the founder of that company, and she used our investment as the means to be able to raise more investment, and she's raised significant amounts of money. But I look at that and just go like, just imagine what we've been able to achieve just by being the first check that we wrote. And the reason why we wrote that first check was, obviously she's a brilliant person, but we took her sexuality off the table. And that to me is the most important thing. We literally were just able to meet her where she was. And I always believe that our best self is our most authentic self. And when you can be that without fear or without retribution, like just imagine what's possible. And And so, when you start looking at the numbers in venture capital, like, less than well, actually, a report came out yesterday to say that less than 0.5% of all venture funding has gone to someone who identifies as part of the LGBTQ plus community. But on top of that, like 75% of founders are going into the closet because they realize that being part of the LGBTQ plus community can be seen as a bad mark against their name when trying to raise capital. And then beyond that, again, like, I hear stories over and over of general partners like myself who have been using limited partner agreements to openly discriminate based on a sin clause that can be found in there if they have different religious or political views. And that to me is just like, wow, like you're judging someone on something that really doesn't matter, because if they are a good operator, they're a good operator. Like, that's really what you need to be focusing on. Like, I'm not here to judge people on their sexuality or their gender identity. Instead, I'm here to judge them on whether or not they can pull this off and execute on a business that they, on an idea that they want to do, because that to me is what's going to make them successful. And ultimately, their success is my success. So why would I not want to be able to push them to succeed? Like, none of these things make sense to me. So I was a founder previously, and so I understood what these struggles and things were, as an LGBTQ plus founder. But while I was a founder, I was also angel investing. And one thing that I sort of noticed was, particularly around that early access to capital, was sadly for a lot of the founders that had been investing as an angel, when they'd come out, a lot of them had lost their friends and family due to bigotry. And when the first round of fundraising is quite literally called friends and family, and you don't have any, it's like, where are you supposed to go to get that access to capital? And so I kind of like built all of that together and sort of like realized that, and then looked at the ecosystem as a whole and realized that there just weren't any funds that were specifically focused on the LGBTQ plus community. And so that's kind of where Chasing Rainbows came from. And then, I got to make up the name and stuff like that, which I love. I love where that sort of came from. And so obviously the rainbow is very symbolic of the LGBTQ plus community. But I looking online one night and I went down a rabbit hole of thinking about unicorns and things like that, because that's obviously what I was looking for. And I found this website that talked about unicorn mythology. And it said to me that unicorns can be found wherever rainbows are. And so, I thought I'll go and chase the rainbows in order to find unicorns along the way. And then as I endeavor to find the end of the rainbow, where my pot of gold is. And so it kind of all fitted. And so, yeah.
I loved it before. I love it even more now.
Thank you. But yeah, so that's a little bit about us, I guess.
No, I mean, you're solving such a crucial problem. And the reason I was so excited to talk to you was really to shed more light on this. And I think that's the biggest frustration time and time again. Even most recently, I've, been on a job hunt recently. I've historically always worked for myself, always been a founder. And now I'm like, damn, I've been in the ring for more than a decade. Now it's time to turn the tables. What else can I do? What else can I apply these skills towards? And I remember I had reached out to a venture fund. They have an accelerator program. Submitted, hey, here's my resume. Here's all the questions you asked for. Here's the homework. Here's all the things. And I had a decent personal relationship. And I said, just letting you know, I put my hat in the ring. It'd be really great to collaborate with you guys. Let me know. And I got a note back. Hey, Lindsay, it's great. It's been great working on you in various projects, but we're really, really looking for someone who has fundraised a bunch of money from the top VCs. I said, oh, okay. And I sat with that and it stung a little bit. I was like, that's what's going to be the defining factor. Like, that's it, really? Like, I've fundraised hundreds of thousands of dollars from individuals, which I would argue is 10 times harder. And so I took a breath, attempted to not be angry, but was still angry, and then sent a pretty scathing email, which scathing for me is probably not other people's definitions. But for me, I was like, and now I'm going to tell you another thing. And I outlined the statistics that you just mentioned. I said, well, if you continue, specifically on your website, it says that you give a shit about DE&I. Clearly, if you are only going to hire people who have fundraised from the top VCs in the United States, you're only going to get cis white men. And it just I got an email back. They were like, well, I guess we can have a chat. I'm like, I don't want to have a chat. The fact that you won't recognize that as the biggest problem is the problem.
Absolutely. And I think that that's one thing that I've been really conscious about, like trying to ask founders during that first meeting I have with them is like, how do I, the very first question I ask them is, how do you believe you and the team are uniquely positioned to not only understand, but solve the problem that you're going after? And I don't need to necessarily have your academic transcript. Instead, I want to understand you as people and your life and what has led you to the point of where you are today. And I think just being able to sit back and take that, because I think people forget, or they look for that, they look for signals, right, or signs within someone's career that can mean that they may or may not be able to pull this off. But I believe that a lot of that stuff is teachable. It's the things that are not teachable, which is the hard grit and that passion and the bits and pieces like that. That to me is what makes a great founder a great founder. And those founders are the ones that particularly when they've done a lot with nothing, like that's the ones that I look at. And I always think underrepresented founders in general have to work twice as hard for half the respect. But what that means is that they go twice as far when given the opportunity. And I've seen this time and time again.
Yes.
Our fund has been around 18 months and we've already had 3 exits and a unicorn, right? I've seen how hard these people work. And it is an absolute privilege for me to be able to showcase the incredible talent that's found within our community. And that's what I will continue to do.
Oh, absolutely. And I know, various podcasts that I've heard you on, articles, all of the things. I know mentorship is really a crucial part of your mission. Do you have any specific instances where your guidance has really directly shaped a startup's trajectory?
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing that we really believe in is like creating like an ecosystem playbook model for every founder that we work with. And what I mean by that is we set them up with a key advisor based on industry expertise or knowledge to help them get from like point A to point B. And so understanding, say for example, they're a pre-seed company, they need to have about 10 grand a month in revenue there to get to a seed company where they need about 100K a month in revenue. So what does that pathway look like? And how do we build in a strategy for them to get there? And they build KPIs into that strategy so that when those founders go out to that next round of funders, who we obviously will introduce them to as well, they actually have tangible assets that they can showcase how they've gotten there, what they've done to get there, and how they meet the minimum requirements. So essentially they're giving that investor no reason to say no. And so an example of that just recently was I had a guy come in who I'm super excited to invest in. The company is called Be Studious. They are an AI company, an AI tutoring company that uses AI as a way of helping people filling knowledge gaps within their study to ensure that they can pass exams. And so this is usually for professional exams, so like your CFA, CPA. And essentially what his tool has been able to do is increase the pass rate by 28% on first sit, which is incredible. When I first met him, he was focusing on B2C. And I said, mate, you need to change this and think about this as a B2B thing. Like go out to like the big accounting firms or the finance firms and go to them and actually show them what you've been able to do and sell them to because every year they've got new grads coming in and every year they're going to start sitting their exams. Anyway, so he did this. I talked him through it and sort of like gave him some advice on that. And then the next day he comes back to me and said, Ben, I listened to your advice. I went and spoke to a person and we closed a $60,000 contract today. I was like, what?
Done.
Like, yeah. I'm like, excellent.
Yes.
And so I think
that's so cool.
And this is just for me. And I'm like the most unaccomplished person in our pool of advisors, right? So I think like just that there's a lot of incredible talent that we can pull from as individuals, and particularly within our community. I don't think we pull enough from the talent that we have surrounding us, and so I've been very fortunate that we've got some really talented individuals who want to give back to our community, and they're doing that through mentorship and guidance.
That's so cool. And I think the other thing that I appreciate about what you've done is that, you've gotten a lot of recognition in terms of being a top investor in 40 Under 40 and a lot of these, media driven accolades, which are, in my opinion, much deserved from what I know about you. But I think what's interesting and what I appreciate about what you've done is that you've been really able to use that to leverage everyone else. You're not only opening the door, you're taking everyone else with you, which many people do not do.
Well, I mean, again, like, I win if everybody else wins, right? And that's how I have to keep. I just want people to remember that. Like, you don't win by guarding deals off. You don't, like, it's too small. Like, I want to see our community thrive, and the best way for us to do that is by removing that survival mentality, and instead, by reinvesting back into our community, the community continues to grow. And particularly as you have that flywheel effect of, somebody even outside of our community investing into our community, into a founder. The founder then creates jobs in the economy. The jobs then allow other people to become investors, which then invest back into other founders.
Exactly.
It keeps going and going and going and keeps growing. It's like that snowball effect as well.
Totally. And is that part of, I know you spoke at UN's General Assembly. Is that really what the focus was?
No, really actually, the UN General Assembly was a bit different. That was actually around what I spoke about earlier, that single acts of kindness element. And so I spoke to the top 200 CEOs globally about that. But when I did my graduation address at the University of Tasmania, I think that's actually where I spoke about this instead. And I spoke about living a life authentically with pride.
Definitely. And I appreciate what you're saying about the ecosystem approach. And that's definitely, it resonates because that's the approach that I've taken as well. And I think it makes a big difference.
Look, I think one thing that we forget is that, there's always going to be people who will be those that will never give us money. And then there will be those people that do give us money and do want to support us. And my thing is always, don't prove people wrong. Prove people right. Prove the people that believed in you at the very beginning that they were right to put their trust and faith in you. And so I think it really, when I got to that point, it really changed my own drive, really, because I then wanted to just prove that I wasn't doing this because everyone told me I couldn't. I was doing this because people told me I could. And it really reframed in my mind what was possible.
Your adventures have included both the startup how many startups have you founded?
I've been part of a few, but I took my first startup that I ever did myself from ideation to exit. Yeah.
Incredible. And not only do you have that startup experience, but you obviously have corporate experience as well. How does your background in, some of the biggest tech giants out there, Salesforce, Oracle, how that combined with your startup experience, how does that really assist you in assisting all of these other startup founders?
Yeah, I feel like I probably was very fortunate. I kind of felt like I was the very first in region for both Oracle and Salesforce for healthcare. And so that kind of helped me because I was kind of like, I had this big giant behind me in terms of resources. But I was able to be creative in how I sort of got into some deals and things like that. And so then I built out a sort of like a playbook essentially for myself. And so I think that for me was probably where that was really great. I think the other thing as well is I didn't want to just be a cog in a wheel either. I think sometimes like you start seeing when you're in some of these large organizations, some of the red tape and inefficiencies. And I think this is where startups are really great because they allow you the opportunity to change some of that. Even before Salesforce, I worked at a company called Johnson & Johnson, and like humongous company. I'm sure you've heard of it. But
never before.
Like there were some inefficiencies around how we were like collecting like sales things and way back then. And I look at that and just go like, this is so inefficient. And my boss at the time, Jane, I love her to absolute pieces. She just said, Ben, tell me how we can do it differently. And so I said, oh, look, at the moment we're having to go around to each hospital and pick up things to go and get out, like, so that they can be processed. And it doesn't seem right. What about if we did this and like, just fax back a thing with the patient name and the label so then you can bill the patient straight away. And she's like, all right, well, why don't you start doing it for you? And I did. She let me try it for me first. I showed her that it would work because I'd seen it work somewhere else, or something similar to that. And then she was like, okay, cool. So then implemented it across the entire team, and then they implemented it across the entire company after that. And so I look at that and just go, you sometimes just need, again, someone who believes in you and believes that you can do something and fix it.
Totally. And what came first for you, your startup or corporate experience?
Corporate experience first, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so I started there and then I went back. And so my startup was called Social Table. So it was a social dining platform. So the idea was that you could book and pay for a single seat at a group table at a restaurant as a way of meeting people. So think dining with strangers and hopefully leaving with friends at the end. And so, like I think about it. The reason why I started it was essentially all of my friends had started getting married and having kids, and I just had no one to go out with on a Friday night anymore. And I wanted to go and make friends again. And I thought, well, how do you do this as an adult? And I don't really know how. And so I tried dating apps and I tried like Meetup, and nothing really worked for me. And I just want to go out for dinner, And so I sort of set it up myself, and we built it up to a level of success. We were in Australia, the US, and Europe, and then the pandemic hit. And no SWOT analysis can ever prepare somebody for the entire restaurant industry to shut down overnight. I will say that. So it was pretty intense. So anyway, I went away back to Australia, and I then ended up pivoting it. So we then took it online. So then we sent wine, beer, spirits, and tea directly to people's houses and had them jump on a Zoom call. Had a sommelier jump on and walk them through a wine tasting for 30 minutes. Then use an algorithm that I created to be able to flip them out to breakout rooms, which were based on like the algorithm had little things like whether you were a cat dog person, what sort of personality type you were, and all these questions that we worked out this algorithm to make. And then, so then we flipped them out to that. And then I pivoted one more time when I started hearing a similar track story from a lot of people who in companies who said that, they were starting new jobs and there was no company culture anymore. There were companies had no way of creating like that element of how they could get their colleagues to not only interact, but interact more on that personal level so that they could be better professionally as a team. So what we then did is we ended up selling this to HR people as a way to keep their company culture alive during the pandemic, and and we increased our sales from, I think it went from like 20 grand a week to 250K a week just by doing that. And then I ended up exiting after that. So yeah,
no big deal.
Well, it's more, I think the thing that you learn about being a startup founder is the fact that you have the ability to be flexible and adapt.
Right.
And you have to adapt to market trends, and you have to adapt
to
what market influences, what's happening. And
for sure.
And I was fortunate that I could do that thanks to COVID, right?
Mm-hmm.
That it actually allowed me the time and space to sit down and actually think this can be better.
Right. Oh, without a doubt. And it seems like another recurring theme for you is scaling things, not just scaling, but globally. And is that part of your, secret sauce, so to speak, that you're really bringing to the table with these different founders that are now involved with Chasing Rainbows?
I always like to look at founders who are doing something a bit different. Either they're the first mover advantage, or they actually get to define what is happening in an industry. And I think that to me is really powerful when you can look at that and be able to reshape an industry because of inefficiencies. And that to me is super exciting because it's just the impact that you have and the impact that you have on the wider community as well. And I think that's the thing that I'm super excited about with a lot of the founders that we work with. So what we've noticed is that there's about 4 pillars that are really sort of coming out within our fund. And so we invest in any LGBTQ plus founder, and we're industry agnostic. But what we're seeing is that the founders are solving big problems, and so that's creating access to healthcare, access to education, financial equity and inclusion, and then those companies that are focusing on the environment and sustainability. And so we've been very fortunate. We've been getting into some deals that I look at and just go, wow, how do we do that? But it's it's a privilege to be able to be part of these deals. So one of my favorite ones is Tom Tex, which just created a faux leather out of mushrooms and shellfish shell waste, so fully bio-based leather. So that one's really exciting because they started in small leather luxury goods and now have moved across to working with car brands, so like Jaguar and Audi. And so looking at that instead, and I think that to me is super exciting because that's where we see a lot of leather and things like that. So thinking about ways that you can really integrate into places like that, which is different but amazing, I think is cool. And it is super industry defining, right? And then I think about, companies that are, like creating access to healthcare, like, thinking about how, like another one that we invested in was a Quality MD, and they're helping, like, helping you through a telehealth service find a doctor or a physician who's similar to you in terms of how you present. So you can say you're a Black lesbian and considering transitioning from female to male. Then you will find they'll pair you up with a physician who is similar to that. So when you get into that room with that doctor, you don't have to explain who you are.
Yes.
You just get medical help that you need.
Totally.
And that to me is really powerful, like really powerful.
It is. It makes a world of difference.
It's just about, I think the thing is like, again, I go back to that point. How do you get the best out of people? You get the best out of people by not putting roadblocks, but instead supporting them to be their best authentic self.
The ethos of Chasing Rainbows is really focusing on radical inclusivity. How do you really see that evolving over, the decades to come?
I think it's about it. It's not just about being diverse. It's about feeling like you're included, right? It's not about just being asked, being at the dance. It's being asked to dance as well. And so that now I'm starting to see that we have this opportunity as a fund to really change the perception of what's possible from the LGBTQ plus community. We're very early on in our fund's life, really, like we're 18 months old, which is kind of crazy. But we've got these successes that have really been highlighted by the investment community as well. And I think that since we're getting these eyes on us, it's an opportunity for us to really change break those barriers and change those perceptions so that more and more people within our community are getting seen for what they can achieve, not for what their sexuality or gender identity.
Final question. It's 2 parts. What is the worst piece of advice that you've ever gotten? And to stick the landing, what is the best piece of advice that you've ever gotten?
Yeah. So the worst piece of advice I've ever gotten is probably I can't do it. I suppose. Not possible. Actually, no. So the worst thing was that when I was doing social paper was actually one of my married friends said to me, "No one will ever want to do that. You'll never do it. This startup won't ever exist. Nobody wants to go out to dinner with people they've never met before."
Lies.
So that was the worst piece of advice I've ever got because I proved it wrong. But I don't know, I spoke earlier about proving people right, but that one I'm glad I proved wrong. I proved myself right. But and then the best advice I ever gotten was actually from Adam Sterling, who who was the person who presented the Venture Capital University course at UC Berkeley, and the thing that he really gave me, the advice on, was to lean into the things that I know, the networks that I have, and the things that make me unique within an industry. Because at the time, when I started Chasing Rainbows, I thought I would just be an underrepresented funder, investing in underrepresented founders. So I would just be investing in Black, Brown, Latinx with female-founded companies, as well as LGBTQ+. And he just said to me at the time, what makes you any different than anyone else? And why would somebody with who is an investor invest in you if they've got the opportunity to invest in another fund that's doing exactly the same thing with a lot more experience than you have? And it was probably that was the best advice I got, because I then differentiated, and then I we focused on, okay, cool. Well, I went back to, again, looking at all the ecosystem and realized that there was no one investing in early stage LGBTQ plus founders. As just solely in those founders. And so I was like, okay, cool, this is what I can do. And that was the network that I had. And I feel like when I now look back on my life, I've really been working towards that goal my entire existence, right? Like, I was, all of my networks are in that space. And I've been sitting, and Patrick and I, my other general partner in the fund, we met each other through Startup, which is the LGBTQ plus entrepreneur network. So we were both in those networks of LGBTQ plus entrepreneurship. And so it just made sense for us to do this. And so I really have a lot to say thank you to Adam for that, because it was really the defining moment that helped me understand what my future was going to be.
I may have lied. That was going to be my last question, but then you mentioned Start Out. And now I need to know your opinion on for-profit, nonprofit, especially being in this like social impact space where there is this social mission, but it's also VC. And what are your perspectives on that? Because I think for so long, there has been this huge tension in opposite directions of there's VCs and then there's nonprofits, and there's no combination of any of the things. But you have a lot of experience being on the board of Start Out and presumably working with other nonprofits as well.
Yeah, so I'm I work with a few other LGBTQ plus charities and things like that too. I can look at it two ways, but I believe that money is a beautiful byproduct of doing what you love. And in this scenario, like I don't see it as making money myself, but instead I'm making money for helping other people achieve their dreams, which therefore makes them money, which therefore makes me money. It's not my personal driver in this. My personal driver is changing the ecosystem. And I believe that we need partners like Startup, like other LGBTQ plus nonprofits who are able to give back to the community to ensure that people are getting the education and the resources they need early on, to then be able to get to the point where they can come to someone like a venture fund and actually get that access to capital as well, knowing that they've hit a lot of those and they've got that support. And so the big thing I really love about Startup as an example here is that it builds a really strong community of entrepreneurs across the globe. So there's like 15,000 LGBTQ plus entrepreneurs in their network. And when I look at that and think like how powerful that is, that you can be part of a community that is where people are going through the same experiences as you. And founders, like one of the challenges with founders is the fact that it gets lonely, right? It's lonely because you're working by yourself. You don't necessarily have a team around you. And so being able to find that community somewhere, I think, is really important. And then it also helps you like understand more and more about what the expectations are to get funding and what that looks like as well. And so I think they provide a lot of education as well as that community and support. And so I'm really grateful for organizations like that, because it's been a great lead source for a fund like mine, where we have found amazing startups through that. And I mean, I remember Complied, which just recently got acquired by Green Check Verified. I met Rose and Audrey literally on a Start Out demo day. I saw them. I thought they were doing something interesting. They were Complied as a cannabis compliance company, which was purchased by Green Check Verified, which is the largest financial rails that does cannabis in the US. And so really great compliment to Green Check Verified's business. But when I met Rose and Audrey, I wrote them one of their first checks, but I only saw them because of Start Out, and I saw them because of the demo day. I would never have found them otherwise. So being able to be in these unique sort of ecosystems, I think, has been really powerful as well.
Totally. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for wanting to hear our story.
Thank you for listening to Learning with Learner and hearing the wisdom, stories, and ideas that will have you feeling inspired and ready to take on the world. If you've enjoyed this, please remember to share, rate, and review. It means the world to me and the team putting it all together. If you're looking for more information, you can find me at lindseylerner.com. That's LindseyLerner.com. Or if you've got any questions or curiosity about me, you can find me on Instagram and TikTok at Lindsey Lerner. Thanks again for listening and have an awesome day.